What is good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I want to talk about what's going on with Tesla and Nvidia. I'm going to break down earnings very briefly about Nvidia, and then talk about what could end up happening to the share price, and talk about other very important factors that will affect the markets. But before I break anything down with all this information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I'm firstly not a financial planner, so make sure you take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100 into the account, you are guaranteed 5 free stocks with a $50 cash reward. The offer ends in just about 13 days, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. All right, guys, so looking at the market, I drew out these possibilities yesterday on the QQQ. It is possible that the Nasdaq starts bouncing as soon as Monday, thanks to Nvidia, and also thanks to Apple, as both of the stocks are starting to show some life. Right now, there is one possibility of that happening, or there could be one last drop before we get some kind of bounce around support right here. And if we do get this bounce and the market starts pushing a bit, there's no guarantee the market's going to keep going, as we still have this big downtrend. The market is still consistently making lower highs. So if we do end up continuing to break down, we could get rejected off this resistance around like 365 or so. If not, another level maybe above it, but we'll have to wait and see on that. And we don't know what's going to cause the market to continue dropping, whether it's the Fed with Jerome Powell speaking next week. Could it be Nvidia's earnings? Could that end up just leading to a big rug pull after the earnings come out? And there could be other factors as well, such as like Fitch, news involving China, and the list goes on. There are many different catalysts that could move the market in the opposite direction. So I don't really know what it's going to be from this point on, but I do believe there's a high probability of the market getting a bounce soon, just temporarily, right? Very healthy little bounce. It does not have to be a massive one. Same thing on SPY. I mean, I kind of drew this out yesterday too. There is a possibility of it dropping down to like 431 and then trying to bounce, or it could just kind of like bounce from the inverse head and shoulders from here. If that's the case, and if we do see anything like that, then it's very possible that something like this could play out. But anyways, I want to now transition to like Tesla. How is Tesla looking, in my opinion, before I talk about Nvidia? Tesla looking pretty decent. It is showing some life right here. It actually managed to close above the little channel that it was on. It's actually above that in the after hours, which is not bad for it. But if this truly is like an accumulation phase and Tesla's going to get ready for a bounce, we could see Tesla make its way back up to like 221 or so. Even 225 is a possibility. But even if a Tesla hits these levels, right, that does not mean Tesla's going to just keep uptrending and uptrending and uptrending, because there are lots of different resistance levels you could always draw out. It could always retest this upper trend line, 221, maybe even 225, and then just reject and come right back down. Those are real possibilities, and we have to be open-minded for them to play out. So it's very important to be open-minded amidst all of the things that go on. And the overall trend on Tesla is still more bearish. The much bigger trend, the 30 minutes time frame, is still looking more bearish overall. But a small little bounce like this is just completely normal. So I'm seeing that as a possibility. Now, the bearish case for Tesla would be this thing just like sells off, continues to just downtrend, does not get a bounce until we see like 210 or so. 209 to 210 could be where it tries to bounce, and then it makes its way up like this before it just gets another rejection, and then it just continues to sell off, right? That's just like the more bearish case for Tesla, depending on the news and etc. But if Tesla moves with the market, and if the market truly does get the bounce, as we're starting to see signs of that on many of the different tickers out there, let me just say that it is still very possible for Tesla to get a bounce from here. It could happen thanks to many tech stocks. Apple is trying to bounce too. I actually talked about that yesterday in my video. Apple could help it, so could Nvidia, so could SPY, the whole market, right, moving on similar algorithms. The algorithms for the market are adjusting. They started to adjust on Friday to buying. We started to see some aggressive buying as well on decent volume. So we might see Tesla do something like this, where it gets this like rebound. Maybe it's trying to form like a cup and handle like formation. It might see some rejections here, and then maybe off Nvidia pumping or something else helps this thing get a little bit higher like this, and then who knows what's going to be causing it to move by the second half of the week. Maybe Jerome Powell is very hawkish and he causes the market to sell off, and then we just start to see the market sell off and Tesla just comes right back down. Maybe it doesn't happen. Maybe it pumps a little bit more to like these higher levels before it comes down. I'm not 100% sure about that part. I'm not going to talk too much about it later into the week, but I'm going to focus more on like the very like shorter term, which suggests that we either drop a little bit more on Tesla and get a nice bounce, or it kind of like bounces a little bit from here. Could try to break this resistance, go a little bit higher before we get a rejection. It's got to be one of those two most likely. We will see what dictates it. I know the Nasdaq is going to play a big role, but now what you're probably waiting for is Nvidia. What is likely going to happen with this stock? There are going to be so many eyes on it. Could this thing explode? The answer is most definitely could. It could do that. If it does end up exploding after earnings, then once again, that's going to drag the whole market with it. It's going to make a very, very big move, in my opinion. Now, moves like this are very volatile. They could be scary. Be very careful when playing them. Use money you're willing to lose because you never know what could happen after earnings. If they miss, okay, things are not going to be pretty. If they do well, then it's going to be awesome. But here's how I'm going to view this. So they have earnings after the market closes on Wednesday. So for that reason, I'm going to try to zoom out just a little bit just to talk about this. So what could happen to Nvidia is this. I don't know how high it's going to go. The full measured move could take this thing all the way up to like the 470s right before earnings end up coming out. I mean, it's a possibility. It could go all the way up to this range right here, right before earnings. Not a guarantee, but what tends to happen to stocks like this, as long as there isn't like bad news, they tend to pump really hard approaching earnings, especially because there's so many eyes on the stock. So many people love to play it. So many people love to watch it. And we have some levels to really watch for, which are going to be like key levels. So the 460 to 462 area is a possibility. I mean, if it breaks that, I would not rule out the possibility of like 470 because this thing really loves to move. Now, could this resemble kind of like an inverse head and shoulders like structure? I mean, I could see it, but I'm not really counting solely based off this because the ultimate outcome all comes down to earnings, and you shouldn't solely base your trades just off formations when you're approaching earnings. That alone is not going to be sufficient all the time, and you have to be open-minded to anything when earnings come out. But what could happen to Nvidia is this. I mean, as long as there isn't like too much bad news coming out for the market, and we could assume that right now we're seeing a lot of bulls making some very, very bullish statements, such as Rosenblatt coming out saying that they're raising their target on Nvidia by 33.3% on positive earnings outlook. They basically had a price target of 600. They raised it to $800 very recently, and they have a very, very strong buy rating on the stock. That is very, very bullish. They're very optimistic on its next earnings coming out. They did mention one thing that's a little concerning is that's the fact that there could be some significant restrictions on the supply of some of their products, such as the H100 Hopper. If that's the case, it could limit the company's guidance, but we're going to have to find out what guidance looks like. I think that's going to be one of the biggest factors for this report. And even if they end up beating, even if Nvidia does very, very well and they beat on earnings and kill it, guidance is also going to be huge. If guidance is not too strong, that could have a very negative effect on them. Now, guidance tends to be a little bit nuanced because if you look at retail, for example, Walmart had strong guidance, yet Target had weak guidance, right, for the next year. So it's really hard to predict how they're going to go about this. I'm not 100% sure about what they're going to say for guidance. We'll just have to wait and see. If they scream AI a lot, that's going to be fun. It can help the stock price move, but it's not going to be enough because guidance is going to be key. Now, there are some limitations to supply that we're seeing right over here. Some analysts are predicting that demand is going to outpace supply by at least 50% over the next few quarters. That's not necessarily a guarantee, though. They also mentioned that if it wasn't for them, the supply constraints, their EPS would be much higher at about like $10.35 a share, which is not bad. And then they're also talking about other things right here. There are other analysts raising their price targets by 19%. Not bad for them. And 91.3% of their ratings are actually favoring buying Nvidia. It's a very, very strong buy. But I'm starting to wonder now that all these analysts are saying buy Nvidia, it's going to pump, it's going to pump. Will it actually end up pumping after earnings, though? That I'm not too sure about. I'm going to be open-minded. I'm not actually going to be playing it, to be honest with you. It's kind of like, to me, it just feels like gambling sometimes when you try to play earnings because you never know what implied volatility could bring. But if I were to play it, I would just be using money I'm willing to lose because you never know what could happen after earnings. Besides that, things are looking quite good for them when it comes to their graphics, their computing, their networking solutions, not to mention their graphics segments, which are offering really, really good GPUs. Their services are just incredible. The way they've improved gaming, the experiences was just incredible. I'm very, very bullish on the company longer term, but for the short term, not as sure. I do believe it's going to pump approaching earnings. I think there's a good chance and there's a nice setup on it, but guidance is going to be key and earnings tend to be very unpredictable. So what do I see happening here? Well, I already did the measurements. The full measured move is going to take this thing very close to about 470 if it does get a breakout from the overall formation. But not going to promise that. We want to watch this on a level to level basis. So approaching its earnings for Wednesday. Wednesday is going to be right here, the 23rd. There's a good chance that this thing might just start pumping. Now, we have a possible inverse head and shoulders like structure that is technically valid, but I'm not going to count on it that much. We had one little dip here that made it a little bit trickier. It is technically still valid, and we could easily see Nvidia start pumping as soon as we open on Monday. Approaching its earnings, there's going to be a lot of excitement. We might see this thing try to slowly break out of this channel as long as there's not like too much negative news for the market, and we might just see it just try to break and break and break approaching Wednesday. I think it's going to get to at least 460 personally. I think 460 to 462 is a reasonable target. Could go even higher to like 470. That would be pretty awesome. Uh, just for like earnings. It could be all the way up there. This could be like where it ends up closing for on Wednesday. But don't forget that on Wednesday, after the market closes, that's when they're going to be reporting their earnings. So it's going to be like either pumping or just continuing to do what it has to do until Wednesday. It might just shoot straight up and just keep going and going and going. Uh, right? It might just continue to do something like that. These are all very, very big possibilities for it. But what do I see happening over the next few days for earnings? I don't really know, to be honest with you. If earnings are strong and they absolutely crush it, there's no telling how high it's going to go with how much money is used to play this and trade this. There's no telling if it's going to just continue to squeeze. If it does squeeze and we see a crazy, crazy pump to like 500 or even like $600 or 800, who knows? If that happens, it's going to be interesting and it's going to move the whole market, and the market's going to keep pushing for Thursday and maybe even parts of Friday. It's going to be crazy. So who knows if this thing is going to gap up like crazy? There is a possibility of that. I do not want to rule that out. It could open in the 500s on Thursday, if not the 600. Who knows? But the same thing could happen in the opposite direction. If earnings are not great on this, and let me actually draw this out just for like more reference on it. I'm going to go to like maybe the 4 hour time frame just for more levels that could be seen, just to make the chart look simpler. So going back, right, we're likely going to get a pump approaching earnings. It's going to likely pump most likely. But then the question is, what about after earnings? Could this thing do the impossible and gap into like the 500s, gap up into like the 500s like this, 550 a share? Who knows? I mean, I just would not rule out targets like this. They sound crazy, but they are possible, right? We could see something like this still play out, whatever, right? We could still see it open at much higher levels, gap up like crazy. Could it be a crazy gap like some other analysts are saying it's going to go to 600? Maybe that's going to happen too. Maybe it gaps up and starts pushing for 600. Then it comes back down, moves down like this, right? Who knows? But what if guidance is weak? What if things don't go as planned? What if they miss on earnings? I don't know if that's going to happen. I honestly don't know. So there's a risk, especially if you're trying to play these earnings, that it might gap down really hard. It might gap down to like 400 flats, maybe even lower than that, into like the 380s, and then just start sinking after earnings come out. So I'm sorry, I'm supposed to draw this. Hold on, I'm supposed to draw this right here. So after earnings on Thursday, after the earnings are out, we might see Nvidia open in the 300s and start tanking to like 350 a share, right? That's a real possibility before we get some kind of bounce. But my point is, you should not rule out this possibility. It is most definitely possible for something like this to happen. Could it get a much bigger gap down and just straight up crash after earnings? We've seen Tesla, for example, pump approaching earnings then dump, or the opposite. So you never know what's going to happen. Could it gap down, come all the way down to 300 and then bounce? I don't know. I honestly don't know what's going to happen after earnings, guys. I just don't know. So if you want to risk it and play this, you could. I do believe it's going to make a huge move. It's going to gap up to some crazy high number or gap down. That is possible. It could even be like a little bit less. I could be exaggerating, maybe just like gap up to like 480 to 500, some like not as big move. That's also a possibility, but it's going to likely be a big move nonetheless compared to like other earnings. We could see this thing gap down to like the very low 400s, if not the 300s, the very high 300s, maybe even like the lower 300s. Could gap up all the way up to like 500, if not 600, right? Don't want to rule it out. There are other analysts saying 600 is going to come. So who knows what's going to happen? Who knows? I don't know. So for that reason, it is best for us to be as open-minded as possible and know the risk of trying to play something like earnings on a day like this. Earnings are capricious and they're very, very hard to predict. I do think it's going to bounce approaching its earnings, try to pump during this level right here. We could see either 460 to 470, one of those two, 462 specifically, and then maybe even like the 470s. And then we're going to see a big move. I don't know which way it's going to go. So we'll have to wait and see. We'll see what happens with their guidance, what they say about their supply chains. Let's see what they say about constraints. With that said, have a great day, everyone. Remain calm, cool, and collected. I hope this was helpful. I hope this gave you guys some visuals of what could happen to Nvidia in just one day. Those crazy levels I'm saying, like a $150 gap up or down, that sounds crazy. It sounds unbelievable, but it can happen, especially to a stock like this. The unimaginable, the crazy things can always happen. You cannot rule out those possibilities. Okay, so thank you for listening. Have a great day. Hope you guys enjoyed this video and the weekend. Have an absolutely spectacular rest of the weekend too. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you and peace out.